hang on. Let me address what Sly just said in chat here. You helped me. All info is great. I'm the casual gamer and play when I can. But if I wanted to be the best, I could be in a raid. Spear and bow. Bleed damage is the way to go. So the spear with the spear and bow build, you're not really. It's not really the bleed damage that's doing the work. Okay. Let's get into my set and just kind of point out all the things that are doing damage here. For one, on Aconite, you can see the poison affinity infix here. Deal 15% more damage to poison enemies. This affects both weapons. So you might be thinking to yourself, hey, if I'm not applying poison shot, then I'm not getting this. False. False. Look at what we've got here on the spear. We've got a arboreal diamond on here. And what the arboreal diamond does is it does plus 15% damage and outgoing healing while at full health. Always have a diamond in your weapons, okay? If you're a DPS and you're in the raid, you want a diamond in your weapons. And then choose your rune glass wisely. For me, I chose arboreal rune glass. For this, hits inflict poison, dealing 8% nature damage per second for 2 seconds. Hits inflict poison. Poison affinity. Deal 15% more damage to poisoned enemies. Guess what? Every time I light attack or use an ability with my spear, I'm inflicting poison, and therefore I am doing 15% more damage every time I hit with my spear. Not only that, but I'm doing plus 15 more damage when I'm at full health, which I'm pretty much all at full health. Then you've also got alternating enchantment, which is huge. Huge damage from the alternating enchantment. You got flame attunement, which really does a lot of damage on angry earth mobs because they're susceptible to fire. And then you've got enfeebling skewer, which is an absolute must. Absolute must. This is the backbone of your build. This is pretty much why you're running spear bow, is for this, to weaken the boss. You're weakening the boss for your tank, so he takes less damage. You're weakening the boss for your other DPS and for your healer, so that they don't get one shot. And you're stacking this. So you've got enfeebling skewer on your spear, which applies 41% weaken, and then you've also got enfeebling skewer 2, the newer enfeebling skewer, on your earring, which applies 20% more weaken. Right? So you're hitting with one ability, skewer, which is not difficult to hit, and you're immediately applying 61% weaken to the boss, or to whatever enemy you're on. That's wild, dude. Wild. And not only that, but on top of that, you're hitting with you also want to be hitting with perforate, and perforate applies a 30% rend for each strike, and it applies 30% weaken. So right there, 61% from skewer, 30% from perforate, 91% overall weaken to the boss. 91% with just 2 abilities. Plus a 30% rend that you're putting on the boss as well. That's what spear gives you. 91% weaken and 31% rend just with 2 abilities. Boom. The second thing that you're doing is you're applying a lot of dots to the boss as well with Bleeding Sweep. In my case, I've got both of them. I got Bleeding Sweep 2, which was introduced in Season 10, and I've got the old Bleeding Sweep from a pair of Hoplite gloves, which they stack. If you didn't know, they stack. So you put 2 dots. You hit with 1 sweep, and you hit the coup de grace, and it applies 2 unique dots on the enemy. And dots are great, but the majority of your damage is not coming from dots, because I am also 436 dex and 150 strength. And if you look at the spear, it scales primarily off of dex and a little bit off of strength. So I am spec to be primarily spear damage, I think. Yeah, I'm maximized at the highest spear damage that I can be. And so I know that you like bow. A lot of people like the bow. I think the bow is a lot of fun. My favorite weapon is the spear, and your spear should, it's got, just because it's got so much utility and so much damage associated with it, your cooldowns come back so fast, dude. So fast. But why would you put those points and strength them? Why not just dex? Well, let's do the math here. So right now we're at 1960 on the spear. 1960 damage. You can always calculate your damage over here on the right hand side. So 1960. So let's just throw everything into dex and see what it does to that number. All right. Now let's throw the rest of it into strength and see what we get. 1944. Look at that. There is a fall off. That is absolutely right. There is a fall off. So what I found was the sweet spot is, well, we'll just hit the button to what I found is that the sweet spot for to reduce the fall off and maximize your damage is 436 dex, and then once I eat my food, I eat strength food for Gorgon Raid. Once I eat my food, I'm at 150 strength, which also gives me plus 15 stamina regen rate when exhausted. And unfortunately, on things like Echidna, you will find yourself exhausted sometimes when you're blocking the tail swipe. That drains all of your stamina, which puts you in the exhausted state. And you want to get your stamina back real quick, because if he does a tail swipe, draining of your stamina, and then immediately goes into like a ground slam, you want to get your stamina back real quick so you can dodge the ground slam. Otherwise, you could find yourself getting killed right there. I've even toyed around with going into like putting some points into int and focus, but with the way that they've decreased the breakpoints, like the bonuses that you get from your breakpoints, it doesn't make any sense to do that. You don't 25 focus for cooldowns? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let me find a, let me go to a training dummy to tell you why I don't do that. As a matter of fact. Let's go here. Let's look at the spear tree real quick. Yeah, there's tons, like somebody else said, there are tons of things that you can put in your, that you can select in your spear tree to reduce your cooldowns. One of the biggest ones for me is this one. Successful heavy attacks reduce all spear cooldowns by 15%. And you might be saying, Slip, how often do you fucking heavy attack with a spear? A lot. Let me show you. Boom, skewer, boom, perforate, bleeding sweep, boom. Guess what? That downward stab that I just did with coup de grace is a heavy attack. Watch my cooldowns whenever I hit that coup de grace. Boom, boom. We're at 10 seconds, 9 seconds. Boom. It instantly reduced from 8 seconds to 6 seconds on my perforate. So coup de grace is a heavy attack, which reduces all your cooldowns. The next best way to reduce all your cooldowns is to dodge. I'm going to hit with a perforate, and I'm going to dodge and hit with skewer. Boom. Dude, watch my perforate cooldown whenever I do that. Watch my perforate cooldown whenever I dodge into a skewer. Instantly went from 8 seconds to 6 seconds. Instantly. And that's because of, let's see if we can find it. Here we go. Aggressive maneuvers. The first successful hit with an ability within 2 seconds of dodging reduces all spear cooldowns by 20%. So I've got 20% CDR right there and 15% right there. 35% 35% cooldown reduction just with those two things. So it literally makes no sense as a spear main who is constantly hitting with coup de grace, who is constantly dodging into abilities. Makes no sense for them to put any points into focus. IMO. But yeah, don't put any, if you're spear main, do not put any points into focus. Just utilize your appropriate rotations. Make sure you're hitting your coup de grace to the best of your ability. I know sometimes you can get a little trolled with coup de grace if you're on like elevation or something. Sometimes they don't hit, and that's just a feels bad man. But you should be hitting that shit most of the time. This build is on your YouTube, correct? Full build. I don't want to hold up stream. I want to see what perks I need on my gear. So I can farm. You're not holding up stream at all, dude. I got nothing fucking better to do. And all these people that are hanging out in here, they got nothing better to do either. They're just giant losers like you and me. It's all good. Brimstone expansion was poggers. It was poggers. Adding the first time that they added in a new area, but it doesn't hold a candle to season 10. Doesn't hold a candle. So let's look at the build. Let's look at the perks and everything. For starters, one of the things that you'll notice on here is I've got carnelians in all of my gear. That's kind of a try-hard, like, it's kind of a try-hard Andy, like, very experienced Gorgon thing to do. What the carnelians do, let's read that for a second. These are punishing carnelians. So I'm assuming you know what rune glass is and what rune glass does to a gem, how it can increase your damage or the leeching that you do or stuff like that. It has all different attributes that it can do. But what punishing carnelians do is, first of all, it makes my melee attacks do plus 1% damage. And since I'm kind of 95% of the time using spear, doing additional melee damage is exactly what I want. But why carnelians? Because I generate 10% less threat, which is perfect. I'm not taking aggro. I'm not stealing aggro. Yeah, I will, Kelly. Don't worry. So I'm not stealing aggro from my tank. I'm letting my tank maintain aggro. And I'm also dealing 2% more damage to taunted foes. So when my tank walks up and does his little fucking shield slap on a group of mobs or on Echidna or on Typhon or whatever, he's taunting that enemy. He's taunting that enemy. And so I'm dealing 2% more damage to that enemy. I said 10 because I've got 5 of these in my gear. So it all stacks up. So I'm dealing 10% more damage to taunted foes, plus 5% more damage with my melee attacks because I've got 5. So I'm dealing 15% more damage just by having punishing carnelians in all of my gear. Not a new player thing to do, though. That is correct. You should be worrying about your protections until you get like all the mechanics down. You understand when you need to dodge, when you need to back away, when you need to hold DPS. You know, you kind of need to understand what all the mobs and what all the bosses do before you consider not only understanding what they do, but being able to dodge it, to either dodge it or avoid the damage. Only then should you even consider putting punishing carnelians into your gear. You should also be stacking enchanted ward, as much enchanted ward as you can, because everything, it may look like the boss is doing like a special move or something, but all damage from all mobs is light and heavy. It's coded as light and heavy attacks. So you should be stacking as much enchanted ward as you possibly can on your gear. Right now I'm 4 out of 5. Technically I'm 5 out of 6 because I have an old piece of gear, an old glove with the old enchanted ward on it that doesn't count towards this stack. It still gives me damage mitigation, but it doesn't count towards the X out of 5 enchanted ward 2 thing. And the reason that I'm running an old pair of gloves is for this perk right here, because we talked about that earlier. I think we went over that. We said that Bleeding Sweep, the old Bleeding Sweep, and Bleeding Sweep 2 introduced in season 10, they stack. They apply unique bleeds to the enemy, and dots or damage over time effects are really strong for prolonged boss fights. Let's address Kella's question about stopping power and plagued power shot. Okay, this is a very new thing to season 10, and it's technically probably a bug, but everybody's abusing it. Everybody's abusing it, and I'm okay doing it too. So let's read these. Let's read what these say. Deal 13% increased base damage to targets inflicted with stopping power slow or exhaust debuffs. Well, guess what? If you've got somebody in your raid that is running a musket and they're using stopping power, you get the benefit from this as well. If they hit somebody with stopping power, then you also, if you've got this on your gear, you also get the 13% increased base damage against that target. Everybody does. Everybody that has this perk on their gear, and somebody in the raid is running a musket and hitting an enemy with this skill, then you also get 13% increased base damage. Same goes for Plague Power Shot. Plague Power Shot hits inflict 10% disease for 8 seconds, and hitting a target inflicted with this disease will increase the base damage dealt by 6.4%. So I am doing, by having these two on here, I'm doing almost 20% more damage to anybody that has been hit by one of these musket abilities. Okay, so where can I farm this gear? It seems like some of it comes from the raid. It does not. Brother, let me tell you something. We don't run Gorgon for the gear. We do not run Gorgon for the gear. Anything that you get from Gorgon or from Isle of Night is usually shit. It's terrible. We run Gorgon and Isle of Night because we think it's fun and we think it's challenging. You get this gear from what I just did from Soulmark runs. Okay, go run your chests. In fact, if you're not familiar with Soulmark runs or Soulmarks, there is a clip of where I think the best place to gather Soulmarks is. And this gear right here, you'll notice it has one fixed perk. The majority of my gear, well, I guess technically 2 pieces, because 2 pieces of my gear have a single fixed perk. All I want as a fixed perk is Sacrificial Empowerment. Sacrificial Empowerment is very strong. You want to stack as much of that as you can. Typically for me, that's only about 3 pieces. And then you want everything else to be either skill slots, or you want it to be defensive slots or offensive slots. Okay? And all this gear can be obtained by doing your Soulmark runs, going to the vendor here, and purchasing mutation gear caches. Because the mutation gear caches contain gear with a single fixed perk, just like this. I got this piece of cloth shoes and this cloth hat from mutation boxes. And that just, all you do is run around, you hit chests and you open boxes once you get enough of them. This shirt, I think this shirt just came from like open world stuff. There's nothing really special about this shirt. It's just got sack empowerment. It's got Life Stealer's Draft. This is also an absolute must for me. You need one of these, one piece of gear with this on it in your gear set. All hits gain 15% lifesteal, and the power of lifesteal is increased by 15% as long as you haven't drank a pot in the last 13 seconds. So as long as you're not drinking pots, then you are life stealing for 15%. Combine that with this ring, which for me is also a must. The Spectral Wrath Enrage ring, which again can be obtained from running Soulmarks, because you can come to the Soulmark vendor and you can purchase Enrage boxes. And when you open those Enrage boxes, you'll have a chance to get a ring like this that has Unscathed Empowerment, which is kind of a meh. It's okay though. You can get Thrust Damage, which is BIS. That's what you want on your set ring. And then you get Enrage Leech, which is so strong. While enraged, all attacks gain 20% lifesteal while below 70% health. So when you get hit by a mob and taken below 70% health, and you hit them with an attack, you're dealing 20% lifesteal plus 15% from Life Stealer's Draft, so 35%. And then that 35% is also increased by 15%. So the math comes out to about 40% lifesteal just by having an Enraged Ring with this infix, and then Life Stealer's Draft on one of your pieces of gear. 40% lifesteal. That's twice as good as Blood Drinker without the damage nerf. It's like wearing 2 Blood Drinkers and the damage nerf being negated. It's wild. It's crazy. It's nuts. I agree. Like I said, you want to stack Enchanted Ward as much as you can. Another really good thing that you want is Enfeebling Poison Shot. So we said we were applying 91% weaken with just 2 spear abilities. You also factor in Enfeebling Poison Shot, And boom, you're at 108% weaken with 3 abilities. And this one's not even hard to hit. And then this spear, I crafted this. This is an old spear. This is not a new spear. This is not a new thing in Season 10. This is an old one. So this spear is actually crafted using the old Gorgonite crafting system. So you can go craft this one yourself. You just got to get the mats together. Let's look at the earring real quick. Again, this is a mutation cache. So I got this one by farming soul marks. For me, this is Bis earring. This is a single perk, which is Beloved. Beloved is an absolute necessity as well. If you're going to go into a raid, you want a Beloved earring. And for me, just having Beloved on it is perfect because now I can fit more offensive stuff as well as a skill slot on here. Because you need a lot of skill slots in this build. You need a lot of skill slots. I mean, just look at this hat. I've got 2 here. I've got 1 here. I've got 1 on my gloves. I can't put anything on attuned leather pants, which is a big sad. I've got 1 on the boots. I've got 1 on the amulet. You can't put anything on the ring. And then I've got 1 on the earring. So I've got just hella skill slots. Hella skill slots. And obviously I've got 1 on the spear as well. And you can't put anything on the Aconite, unfortunately. And then finally, on spear bow, you want to stack as much vicious as possible. Vicious is king. Vicious is king in spear, because with the spear, again, in the skill tree, you have so much crit chance built into the spear that stacking vicious makes it so that you are just hitting like a truck with that spear, dude. You are hitting like a truck. So yeah, stack your vicious, get your keenly empowered in there, get your enchanted ward. Keenly fortified, also super strong, because like I said, you're hitting crits. You're critting a ton with both the bow and the spear. So you're getting a little extra damage mitigation here. I like to keep it on my attuned leather pants, because it's got 2 defensive slots here. And so enchanted ward and keenly fortified, they pair really well together for this build. You don't need to worry about keenly jagged. In fact, that's kind of a dead offensive perk for raids, because somebody's going to be running keenly jagged, and it doesn't need to be you. You need to be worrying about vicious, keenly empowered, keenly fortified, and if by some miracle you've got an extra offensive slot for whatever reason, probably thrust damage or thrust harnessing. And then always, in my opinion, you want to be running vines. So we just said we're applying 108 weaken, 108% weaken with 3 abilities in our build. And then with vines, you are weakening for an additional 20%. So in your entire kit, you have 128% weaken. 128% weaken in your kit. And what? 50% rend? Because you got 30 from perforate and 20 right here from vines. So 50% rend and 128% weaken. What a build, dude. What a build.